A warm welcome to all the viewers. Today's session of tourism and hospitality research is going to be a special one as we are going to discuss about two important concepts while framing the research design. The first step is to identify how are we going to measure the indicators, how are we going to measure the variables of our study. That is why it is quite important to know how to identify the nature of your variables, and they can be classified into reflective and formative constructs. Measurement models. In the realm of measurement models, the terms formative and reflective constructs pertain to the manner in which indicators, or also known as observed variables of the study, are associated with an underlying latent variable or unobserved variable which is under the examination, which is what you want to study. Reflective constructs. So let us first understand a little bit more about reflective constructs before we dwell into the actual nature, actual diagram, actual depiction of reflective and formative constructs. Indicators as consequences. In reflective models, the indicators are seen as the result of or are caused by the latent variable. For example, if measuring customer satisfaction, indicators like service quality and product quality are reflections of the overall satisfaction level. These indicators are often interchangeable because they all represent aspects of the same underlying latent variable. High correlation between indicators. Indicators in a reflective model are typically expected to be highly correlated because they all are manifestations of the same construct. Formative constructs. Indicators as components. In formative models, the indicators define the latent variable. The indicators are the components that make up the construct. For example, while measuring the Human Development Index, indicators like life expectancy, education, and income are measured. So you see here, life expectancy, education, and income, all three are quite different from each other, but they form the construct which is Human Development Index. So all of these three, according to the theoretical background review of literature you have done, they are quite important to measure the Human Development Index. That is why we call them as formative indicators. Changes in the indicators will directly impact the value or interpretation of the latent variable, and they are non-interchangeable because they convey different meanings. Example, measuring socio-economic status using indicators like education, occupation, income, and neighborhood. Now here is a beautiful and a simple representation for all of you to understand the concept in a easy manner. So we are talking about how to measure satisfaction, which is our latent variable, unobserved variable, through the observed variables. And the indicators for measuring satisfaction would be, I would recommend this restaurant to others, I appreciate this restaurant, I would revisit this restaurant. So if you closely see, all of these three indicated in reflective construct have the same meaning, and that is why we say they are reflective. And the arrows move from the latent variable to the observed variable in case of reflective construct, whereas in a formative construct we see that the indicators arrows move from the observed variable to the latent variable satisfaction, because all of the three statements are quite different. Here we are measuring satisfaction as a feature of three important things, which is restaurant staff is quite friendly, restaurant service is prompt, Restaurants' washrooms are hygienic. So you see here all three convey different meanings. So let us wrap up the session and see the key differences between reflective construct and a formative construct through this table. Indicators are consequences of the latent variable, whereas in a formative construct, indicators define the latent variable. They are highly correlated in reflective construct, whereas they are not necessarily correlated in a formative construct. They are often interchangeable in a reflective construct, whereas they are not necessarily interchangeable, or we can say they are not at all interchangeable in a formative construct because they will change the meaning of the latent variable. Latent variable causes the indicators in a reflective construct. In a formative construct, indicators cause the latent variable. So depending on the study which you are doing, depending on the research question and your research objectives, you can study satisfaction as a reflective construct as well as a formative construct when you have a strong backing, a strong theoretical background. These are some of the useful resources, especially pertaining to tourism and hospitality research, which you can refer to learn more about reflective and formative. So people have started acknowledging that reflective and formative constructs are quite different from each other and they convey different meanings. That is why the results which we get out of the measurements of these constructs may vary. If you frame a construct which was supposed to be framed like a reflective construct or a formative construct but has been framed in an opposite manner, you might get different results. I hope this session was quite useful and interesting for you. Meet you in a new knowledgeable session soon. Thank you.